Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. Today, I want to talk about setting ideas. I've talked about brainstorming, I talked about doing design documents, and that I always start with the setting before I do story, and then I do system mechanics. So, I thought I'd just talk about ideas for settings. Kind of gonna walk you through kind of how I do my notebooks, kind of ties into brainstorming, but I'm just going to talk about like kind of what I even do now and how I come up with setting ideas. So, weeks ago, I showed a little game I made in 3 days based on an old Atari game called Star Raiders, where the ship flying around doing combat. You could pick up cargo and it lets you upgrade the ship. Well, I've actually been designing a much bigger game that would be part of because I want to do exploration. I want a storyline. I mean, I realize, God, this is starting to sound like Starfield, but I'm talking about something that I would make all by myself just for funsies. So don't think Starfield, think Vampire Survivors, but with a ship instead of a person, and in space, and instead of monsters, it's other spaceships. So I kind of have that quasi-designed. I may actually see what I can do with it. My big limitation right now is art. So I'm making things with whatever art I can find on the Unity store. But I may continue with that. I also recently went back and read my notes on how I do a Lord of Light game, which I think would be really cool. But that one's heavily story-based. And I learned my lesson with Temple. I'm not going to try to write characters, but it was fun to read it again. But then that got me into another setting I designed, which it starts like a Magic game, but then it turns out it's really tech. And then it turns out the whole thing is post-apocalyptic. It reminded me of Lord of Light. Kind of reminds me of an old cartoon called Thundar the Barbarian. If any of you people remember that cartoon, which it was magic, but it was set after a nuclear war or something on Earth. It is very bizarre. This game wouldn't necessarily be set on Earth, or is it? Looking through all my Arcanum notes, I found a bunch of ideas I had on trying to make turn-based better, just kind of improving turn-based or making it more enjoyable for people who prefer real-time. But my biggest problem with real-time in a lot of games is when it's my turn, I don't want anything moving. So one of the ideas I had was everybody rolls initiative, like Fallout, Arcanum, Temple, but all the monsters that are contiguous have initiatives where they all go one after the other without any player characters in between. You just collapse them and they all take their turn together. Or if you even want to take that farther, all enemies just get one initiative roll and then they go. So if it's just you playing by your single player character, then you'd go, then all the creatures would go at once. Then you'd go, then all the creatures would go at once. Did a couple simulations of that and found out that there's advantages and disadvantages for the monsters to go at the same time. So one of the advantages, of course, is in a game like Temple, where you get flanking. If they both can go together, then they can both get on either side of the player character and they both get flanking. Where if they had to go individually, the first one wouldn't get flanking and then the second one would. There's a similar disadvantage where if they both come down to the player character and the first one hits and kills the player character, the second one now doesn't have enough points, move points to go anywhere else. Looks like the pros and cons for lumping all the monsters together kind of even out. Certainly makes turn-based a lot faster, but still gives me what I want in turn-based, which is on my turn, nothing's moving, so I can click on things, I can decide what to do, I can put area of effects to cover exactly the creatures I want. So kind of like that. Put all those notes on one side and said if I ever do another turn-based game, I'm doing something like that. Of course, I found my old Fallout design, just to remind people, over 15 years ago, maybe even more than 20. I wrote down an entire design for a new Fallout game. I never tell people about it because I've seen ideas of mine show up in other games, and I watch people I know go, they've stolen my idea. And I'm like, no, they haven't. A lot of people come from the same, games and backgrounds, and ideas are a dime a dozen, and lots of people have the same idea. It's just how it's implemented. Sometimes it's just who gets there first. So I have no doubt that I will see some elements of my Fallout game in new games, maybe even new Fallout games, but I know it's a coincidence because nobody knows about it but me. However, one post-apoc world I am willing to talk about that I thought was an interesting idea was I did a post-apoc world that was caused by a virus, but the virus was really engineered by an AI. Because the whole Terminator thing I never got, because why would Skynet just destroy so much of the planet, including stuff it needs and resources it would want to get rid of humans? Just release a virus already. It's not going to affect any of your robots, and the humans will all die. It's dumb that it didn't do that. But anyway, what I really liked about this game was the main character was a child. And what I loved about that was it not only let you do some things that were really interesting, like a child can get into places because they're so small, they can get into vents. You don't have to make gigantic vents for adults to get into. You can make places that kids can slide under fences, can get into vents. But also, a child can't read or even understand a lot of stuff, especially if this child was really young when the apocalypse happened. So I love that warning signs would be in gobbledygook. Warning messages, computers were just, you have no idea. It's just random garble. And you're just, even if you're playing as an adult now, you're just trying to work your way through all this stuff that you do not understand. You may understand the word warning, but then you don't understand anything that comes after that. I think that's fun and funny and kind of realistic. I remember when I suggested this, I've had multiple people go, you can't have the main character be a child and possibly get hurt. And I at the time I was like, I think you can. But then Limbo came out, the game Limbo. And I'm like, hello, child, main character dying in horrific ways. It's even worse when you turn on the mode that makes it black out the screen when your character's going to get killed, because then you just hear a gruesome death of a child. So I don't think this is a big deal anymore, but we also don't have to have the deaths be gruesome. In fact, there was one game I designed where I wanted the game to be done in one art style, and then when the child died, it would melt away and you'd see what the world was really like. In other words, the child was imagining this. And I told this to an artist who just went, so you want us to do 2 disjoint art styles and completely double up our art load just so you can have that really interesting death mechanic? And I'm like, yes. They weren't having that. So I was going through my notes. This led me down the post-apocalyptic rabbit hole. I wrote down what I thought every different way you could make a post-apocalyptic game. So let me share those setting ideas with you right now. The first one's war. That's a given. You just know what it is. Humans fight, devastate the planet, whether it's with nukes or just regular bombs or they've just wrecked everything. War is apocalyptic. The next one was radiation, which could be nuclear weapons, but you could have solar flares, you could have power plant accidents, you could have laboratory leaks. There's all different ways you could have radiation leading to a post-apocalyptic world, which then led me to the third way, which was plague. Interesting. I wrote this all up 15, 20 years ago. Wait a minute. It's dated 2002, this file. So 20 years ago. So this is not COVID related, but one kind of plague is natural or accidental. We still don't know what's going on. Another one is terrorist. That's, that's kind of what my AI one was. My AI post-apocalyptic, the AI made a virus just to get rid of all the pesky humans. That led me into the fourth type of post-apocalyptic setting, which is ecological upset. Oddly, for this one, I came up with the most subgroups. There's global warming. There's ice age, or global freezing. There's an astronomical collision like a meteor, or I don't know, the moon falls into the earth. There were general disasters like flood, earthquakes, volcanoes. There was microbiological blooms. This can happen on land, but I've also heard this is something that can happen in the ocean, where you have huge algal blooms and it destroys all the life in the ocean, but it also destroys a lot of the plankton, and then you get less oxygen and all kinds of bad things happen. Of course, famine, which could have been the microbiological terrorist thing, going after food plants instead of people, but famine can happen for all kinds of reasons. And then maybe the sun wanes, so it's not giving off enough radiation to support plant life, or it gets colder, or it gets hotter, or it gives off deadly radiation. So you can see these kind of all go into other different categories. I threw in supernatural causes just because I wanted to be complete. I do think you kind of should keep these separate. You probably shouldn't have a post-apocalyptics and have all of these, but supernatural ones could be demonic interference. You could do what I call last days, which you could call revelation or rapture, or whatever religious significant you want to put on that. There could be a dimensional shift. So now things are coming in from another dimension, but they're really scary and demonic and supernatural seeming. There could also just suddenly be magics in the world again. Nobody knows why, but boom, the sudden influx of magic may just devastate our planet. So the sixth one is I put under just called evolution. Maybe some monstrous new creatures arise. Godzilla comes out of the ocean. That may be related to radiation. It may not. We might have the next evolutionary step of Homo sapiens, which means smarter people, maybe psychic people. Who knows what the next evolutionary step would be, but they probably don't need or want us around anymore. You could do computer AI. See, that just factors into previous ones I've said. You could also have a form of transcendence, which is explored in a lot of sci-fi novels, where basically humans go to the next step, not biologically, but like mentally. Maybe we all transform into energy, and maybe not everybody does that. So it leaves some people behind. And then the last one was just various alien scenarios, some of which we were talking about back in the original brainstorm for Fallout. Alien invasion, or they come here to enslave people, or they're here to abduct people, or they're here to steal a lot of our resources, kind of like the V miniseries where they're here for our water, but it turns out they're actually here to eat us as food. There's also the War Against Cthulhu, the novels by David Gerald, which talk about there basically just being a microbiological diaspora in the galaxy, and wherever those tiny biological organisms land, they then kickstart an entire alien ecology on Earth. There's a million ways to do this. So I think those are the 7 ways: war, radiation, plague, ecological upset, supernatural causes, evolution, or aliens. So that's kind of my mini brainstorming, home journaling. Just I grabbed a bag of settings from my current and old notes and just thought I'd share them just to show I still think of these things. I think you guys should think of them too if you want to make games. And for everybody who thinks my semi-retirement is boring, you're wrong.